In today's video, we're examining a crucial turning point in early American history, the colonial rivalries of the 18th century that set the stage for revolution. In particular, we'll focus on the Seven Years' War, known in America as the French and Indian War, and how it reshaped the map of North America, strained colonial relations, and ignited the sparks that would eventually lead to the American Revolution. Let's get started. To understand the Seven Years' War, we have to start with Europe. Historic rivalries among the great European powers, especially Britain, France, and Spain, had long spilled over into their colonial empires. These tensions followed them across the Atlantic to their holdings in North America. By the late 1600s, France controlled almost the entire interior of the continent, from the Great Lakes to the Mississippi River Valley. Despite the size of their territory, only about 60,000 French settlers lived there. Instead of large settlements, the French relied on the fur trade and built a sparse network of forts to secure their claims. Tensions escalated in the Ohio River Valley, a critical region both Britain and France claimed. The French built forts to block British colonial expansion westward, and in response, Virginia's colonial governor sent a young militia officer named George Washington into the area. In 1754, fighting broke out at Fort Necessity. Washington and his men were simply outmatched and forced to surrender on July 3rd after losing 31 soldiers. The skirmish marked the beginning of the French and Indian War, a brutal and continent spanning conflict between France and Britain, their colonists, and their respective Native American allies. The early years of the war went very poorly for the British. Their troops suffered repeated defeats and colonial cooperation was inconsistent. To improve coordination, British officials called for a meeting of colonial representatives in 1754 at the Albany Congress in New York. At the Albany Congress, delegates from 7 colonies agreed to a plan proposed by Benjamin Franklin, the Albany Plan of Union. This plan called for a unified intercolonial government and a system for collecting taxes and raising troops for mutual defense. Although it was ultimately rejected by the colonies, who feared losing their own control over taxation, the Albany Plan was a significant early step toward unity. It would serve as a precedent for the type of cooperation that would resurface during the American Revolution decades later. As the war dragged on, British fortunes began to change in the late 1750s and into the early 1760s. By 1763, the war ended with the Treaty of Paris. Under its terms, Great Britain gained French Canada and Spanish Florida. Spain, in return, received the French Louisiana Territory. The war effectively ended French power in mainland North America, and Great Britain emerged as the dominant colonial force on the continent. The British victory in the Seven Years' War marked a turning point, but far from creating harmony, the war left a legacy of tension and resentment between Britain and its American colonies. First, Britain's supremacy over its European rivals in North America was now undisputed. Second, the war strained the relationship between Britain and its colonies. British officials saw colonial militia as undisciplined and unreliable, and they were frustrated that some colonies had flat out refused to contribute troops or funds. On the other hand, many colonists believed their military efforts had been essential and were unimpressed with British leadership on the American frontier. Third, Britain's approach to colonial governance changed drastically. The war had doubled Britain's national debt, and policymakers decided it was time the colonies paid their fair share. This marked the end to salutary neglect, a period when the British had loosely enforced colonial policies. Now they sought more direct control and stricter enforcement, especially through new taxes and trade regulations. Lastly, the war set off new conflicts with Native American nations. As colonists rushed into settled lands west of the Appalachians, territory newly gained from France, native tribes resisted. Led by Chief Pontiac, a broad native alliance launched attacks across a wide area from New York to Virginia in what became known as Pontiac's Rebellion. Instead of relying on colonial militias, Britain dispatched regular troops to crush the uprising. In an attempt to prevent further conflict, King George III issued the Proclamation of 1763, which prohibited colonists from settling west of the Appalachian Mountains. To many colonists, this felt like a betrayal, an unfair punishment after they had fought and died to win that very land. Thousands ignored the order and pushed west anyways, defying royal authority. What began as a war between empires over territory had far reaching consequences. The Seven Years' War gave Britain control of North America, but it also left the British Empire in debt, native tribes under threat, and American colonists increasingly defiant. Both sides emerged from the war with very different views of each other and of their roles within the empire. That mistrust, fueled by new policies and conflicting expectations, would deepen in the years ahead. The road to revolution didn't begin with a tax or a protest. It began in the forests of the Ohio River Valley, in a war fought for empire, where colonists and soldiers fought side by side and then turned their backs on each other. That's all the time we have for today. Thanks for joining me. We'll see you next time.